Good evening and welcome to True Talks with Project Managers. My name is Harry Zolkauer. I'm the Vice President of the Southern Maryland PMI chapter. Tonight's show is the first of 8 planned for 2022, and boy, do we have a great show planned for you this evening. We'll be talking to our very special guests, Laura Barnard and Andrea Cirelli, about leading successful PMOs. Before we get started, I want to share some really great news. Starting with tonight's show, PMI of Southern Maryland is now partnering with the Washington, D.C. PMI chapter so that we can pool our talent and resources together in order to provide an even better experience on the True Talk show. Also, I do want to give a big shout out to our producer, Dan Stay, who is our wizard behind the curtains tonight, helping us make this all happen magically. And before we start, one other thing, if you have any comments or questions, please use the YouTube chat, and both Dan and I will let our host know when there's a question or a comment posted. And speaking of hosts, introducing our True Talks host with the most, the inscrutable, the incomparable, the Renaissance man of our time, the one and only, here's Kendall.
So oddly enough, that's also my dad's name. So one of two of a kind. Thank you, Harry. I see you laughing, but I can't hear you. So I hope you're well tonight. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for pulling together these guests. One of whom we've spoken to in the past in many contexts across this DC region here of PMI. So also, thanks for welcoming the PMI WDC chapter. I hope we have some listeners in from WDC today, PMI WDC. It is, I think, as Marina was saying, it's so important that we see ourselves as a virtual community, and we definitely have some of the same interests here in the Beltway space of the Maryland, DC, Virginia space, Virginia area. So I appreciate you letting and inviting and sharing your product with the rest of the chapters in this area, and certainly with PMI WDC. So welcome any other DC folks. That's also my home chapter. So I appreciate you having us. So with that, Harry, I had a question for you. What made you come up with wanting to do PMO leadership? Like, how does this interface with you or the chapter? Like, where did this come from?
Yeah, so actually, it's funny because I saw a post from Laura on LinkedIn that she had won a very major award, which I guess we'll talk about in a little bit, a global leader for the PMOs. And it got me thinking, it'd be great to have Laura on the show, as well as somebody who's actually a practitioner who kind of talk about, just the best way to approach and succeeding in PMOs. So that was sort of the inspiration, and we've never talked about this on our show. So I think it's something that I think our audience will appreciate.
Yeah, we've done a lot of stuff around individuals and how they're interacting with risk and how they lead things. And here in this case, we're really talking about an organizational construct. And I think that's important for us to recognize as project managers, because we may be sitting in PMOs as well, right? So for me, it's an issue about the context that often we find our work in. And I think that's really important for us. So with that, why don't I bring on our award winner and our happy PMI contributor and volunteer as well. So with that, I will bring up here Laura Barnard. So Laura is the Chief Impact Driver. Impact is her model and her system. She's a PMO consultant, and she runs PMO strategies. And as Harry just said, Laura, I saw you were named the top global PMO influencer of the year. This is the only award of its kind, actually, by the PMO Global Alliance. And so the PMO peeps be talking to PMO peeps, and they say you're the best peep, at least in the last year. So you're going to have to keep running for it, though, to influence others. So we're going to get to hear something about how you influence them, I guess, tonight. Also, before she goes and prances off to other shores, it turns out you're a keynote speaker running around global-like. And so you're supposed to go off and be a keynote speaker of note. Where?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm actually doing it at many PMI chapters coming up here. I've had several PMI chapters, and also, our friends over in the UK have invited me to come headline their PMO conferences, two of them in the UK later this year. So yeah, there's going to be a lot, and that's the House of PMO. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it, but if you want to come visit me over in the UK, I'll be there. And I
Very
do actually want
Victorian sounding to me.
yeah, I know it sounds fun. I said this is an opportunity to take the family and travel a little. But I do want to really quickly, Kendall, if it's okay with you, give a quick shout out to all of my DC family. I miss you all so much. We spent a lot of time at all the PMI chapters in the DC area when I lived in the area. And of course, then Kendall, our work with Project Management for Change. But I miss you all dearly, but not the weather. We moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida a couple of years ago. So definitely let me know if you're in town. But big shout out to all of my DC family. I miss you all so much.
Shout out back to you, and because actually I used it for some of the day. Everyone should know that you also are a fellow podcaster. We both run our podcast. You've got some 130 plus podcasts out there because you're a machine and you're influencing people. I hear you win awards for that. But PMO Strategies podcast is a good one, and you've had some both great guests and also very punchy topical things where you're even just speaking to it. So I really appreciate some of the words you've put out there into the market and some things I get to pick up and even use with clients. So I want to get started though with a couple of things here. I want to lay some groundwork first though, if we can, which is one, I want you to be able to characterize what a PMO is, because I think it's an organizational construct for a lot of us, and it's a context we find our work in. And I don't mean the ideal, the pristine, the one we all need to be in, but in the reality as we would typically experience them, what is a PMO? You know, a client comes up to you as a consultant and says, you know, I need you to come in and look at something. What are you walking into when you go to see their PMO? What is a PMO?
Sure. Well, and I think I'm really glad that you started with that question, because I think that's part of the challenge is that just like you can define project manager a million different ways in an organization, and all of you watching this know that, the PMO is similar. What some people, some experts will focus on, well, it's got to be of certain types, or it's got to provide certain services, or it's not a PMO unless it does X. And so generally speaking, holistically, and we'll talk about my personal perspective on what it should be doing, but generally speaking, it's like you said, it's an organizational construct. It's, and then what I teach my students is it's more of a business unit than a project type function. So those that it generally is helping to facilitate the project delivery in the organization, most simply stated. But I have actually a greater challenge for the PMO than just facilitating project delivery, which we'll talk about. But generally it's like, hey, our projects aren't getting done. They're taking too long. They're costing too much. The project stuff isn't working. I need someone to run this. I need someone to tell me what's going on in the organization, what work is happening, who's doing what, where all the bodies are buried, and how we can make sure that we're getting our projects done.
Yep. So you just mentioned that it's inherently political at some level, possibly, at least because it's an organization where the body's buried is at work. Actually, I should have caught up with this real quick. What do you actually do for a living? You consult to people who need a PMO, you fix PMOs, you found PMOs, you train, like, what do you do? You influence. Okay, I got you're an influencer. What else? What does it that put you in this role?
Well, and I'm really proud of that award from the influencer perspective, because what it tells me is that where we've been headed, and as Kendall, I've been talking about this for years, where we've been headed for years with PMOs, and where we've been saying they're going is starting to get recognized in the industry as this is the path, this is the future of PMOs. And that's a lot of what I talk about. And of course, we do have the podcast, tons of free content, resources, training programs, workshops that we do for the community for free, as well as hosting the largest PMO specific conference for free in the world. So we've been doing that for a few years as well. But on the what do I do with my day, in addition to generating and producing all this content and figuring out where things are going, we work with clients that need us to come in and help them address these kinds of business pain points that that we're talking about here. And we also run the only program of its kind that is part training, part implementation, and part mastermind and coaching as well. So we take individual PMO leaders and those wanting to become the PMO leaders of the future, and we help build their own leadership skills and capabilities, as well as give them our fantastic framework and resources and step-by-step process to build or up-level a PMO in their own organizations. And we have a 100% success rate with that program, and we use it with our clients. We've been using it with our clients for years. It's based on what I learned when I was a PMO leader for 15 years inside organizations. And so we've got about 15 years plus 9, way too many years of experience in PMOs that we have put into this whole framework and implementation process. So we go help organizations solve the business problems that they have that PMOs and project management are meant to solve. And
you
highlighted
that it's a business unit.
Yeah.
This idea that it's a business unit over a project, kind of a project focus. So before I ask you about that, I want to ask you, we've got a lot of PMs presumably here listening in the audience. We're speaking to PMI chapter. Curveball, project managers, they make good PMO leaders, yes or no? What do we got to do to get, there was the look.
So here's the thing.
We're getting into it here.
Yeah. And you know me, Kendall, I will call it like I see it. So that's good. I'm glad you asked that question. I think that both project leaders and PMO leaders need to understand that what they really are is what I call impact drivers. What they really are there to do is to help solve business problems, not project problems. We think we're hired to fix project management and to solve project problems. But in fact, what we're really there to do is help the organization achieve their business strategy with the highest possible return on investment we can as quickly as possible. And to do that, we need to think and act outside of the project management realm. Like we got to stop focusing only on the outputs we create and start helping the organization achieve business outcomes. So it's that shift. Whether you're a project manager or a PMO leader, if you can do that, and that's what we teach our students, if you can do that, you can be an outstanding PMO leader. You don't have to have project management experience to be an outstanding PMO leader, but you do have to understand the business and step into the role of what we call impact driver in order to be a good PMO leader.
We all want to drive value, and I think we want to be perceived that we want to be viewed as competent and effective in that. What is it about PMOs that need to position themselves to drive this value, as you were, to be a business unit, to be effective in that way? What are we missing, and where would you position them? Because I still see them as integrating projects and seeing the big picture of the dependencies between projects and standards, I think. I mean, if I'm not wrong, there's an element of that. Yeah. How is it you would position them differently when you say, we have to be part of the business and part of the strategy? Like, so what does that mean a PMO, which is a group, does?
Right. So let me put it this way. So when most PMO leaders are hired, and this we hear from all of our, tens of thousands of PMO leaders in our community, they're hired to fix project management. And that's the challenge. What happens is PMO leaders are hired or replacing a PMO leader that wasn't doing it right, or projects are taking too long. Projects are costing too much. We don't have good project management knowledge, and on it goes, where the emphasis is focused on that project planning, project delivery stage of the full life cycle of strategy. Because the business leaders, they have to solve the whole strategy problem, right? Like they have to define strategy, they have to deliver strategy, and they actually have to make sure that that strategy realizes a return, right? That it was worth doing in the first place. But when they, Kendall, come on, how many books are out there that talk about closing the gap between strategy and delivery, right? Or fixed strategy execution?
I think I just wrote a presentation for a client like that.
Exactly. Well, what they think, and maybe this will be helpful. What they think they need to fix is project management. But here's what happens. The PMO leader comes in, and all of you have seen this story, whether you've been in a PMO or not, you've seen this happen. The PMO leader comes in, they put templates in place and process in place and tools in place, and they train everybody on project management, and they put PMs in place, and then they only get marginal improvements. And when you talk to the project managers, they're like, I have 60 projects I'm trying to manage right now. My head is going to explode. My resources are spread way too thin. My subject matter experts have 18 things they haven't do in a day, and we can't get anything done. So what's happening in reality is before the project manager is ever assigned, the process is getting broken. And the poor project managers, they're usually not added until strategy's been approved, project's been approved, funding's been approved. Okay, poof, go, make the project happen. But they've been set up for failure right from the beginning. And therefore, when the PMO is coming in to save the day, right? The PMO is coming here, okay, I'm going to fix all of this. We only see marginal improvements when what we're focused on is fixing that strategy delivery space, the planning, the
PMOs help
delivery,
the
the
execution.
PMs, the tools, the toppers. Yeah. So it's project execution is actually, and I hope you PMs appreciate hearing this, it's not you, it's them, right? It's not the project managers necessarily. We do need some basic fundamentals. We got to make sure that we are doing the right things. And that does not mean applying every possible tool in the toolbox. And that does not mean every page of the PMBOK, regardless of which version. It means right sizing what makes sense in order to do project delivery. Now, let's assume all of you smart project managers out there are doing that. The problem is happening before you even get involved. They fired the starting gun on 200 projects when they really had resources to handle 100. When you ask your business leaders, what's the priority of all of these initiatives? What do they all say? Everything is number one priority. So what's happening is resources are being stretched too thinly. Projects are not being prioritized. Projects are not being connected to strategy. That communication of what the strategy is the business is trying to execute on isn't communicated properly to the rest of the organization. I mean, you hear these stories again and again. And what's happening and where the PMO has a really unique opportunity is to help the organization fix the process that's happening before the projects ever start. That
So let's
whole
talk about
front
that a little.
end of the strategy process.
Let's dig into that
Yeah.
just a little bit. In fact, we've got to your point, we have a question from the audience on this, which is,
Great.
how do you manage this development of a PMO such that it closes that gap? Because there is a disconnect. Let's assume there is a disconnect. What is it that you're, so as a PMO leader, I'm like, oh, I wish I were sitting at the big boy table, right? The adult table, right? I want to see what the executives are, or is that not it? How do we make that connection? What are some examples of how that happens organizationally?
So I have a really interesting story about that, because the very first time I spoke on a stage was at the PMI Montgomery County chapter meeting on a panel, and it was either like June of 2011 or 2012. And I was on this panel, and after we all took our turns talking, and Mike, our buddy Mike Hannon, was right in the front of the audience, and someone said, a PM stood up and said, but they should just get what we do, and project managers should just automatically have a seat at the table. Of course. And I said, nope, hold on. We've got to earn our place at that table. And to do that, project managers, PMO leaders, we need to be understanding what the business is trying to do and help explain to the business how we can support them and lead them on the journey of a more successful strategy delivery process by fixing the underlying root causes of the problems that are causing project management strain. When it's not fixing project management, it's actually helping educate the business leaders, not on project management and getting us and all that things that PMs waste time doing. You should not be trying to have them get project management. We need to make sure we understand the business and the strategy and help position those business leaders to make educated and informed decisions and understand and appreciate things like project prioritization and, like our friend Mike talks about, staggering and increasing portfolio throughput and getting business results and measuring and defining the success of projects, not by how on time and on budget they are, but on how much they're helping the organization achieve the return on investment expected. So go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, no, I want to ask a little bit around this, because we got another question here that begs a deeper one. PMO, that O stands for organization. So we're not talking about a program manager, a manager of projects in and of itself. Right. It's about an organization. In my mind, an organization means there's at least two people, probably a PMO leader and another person, or a something. I don't know that that's true, but we had a question who says, what happens when you're a party of one? So now I'm trying to do the fix the PM stuff, right? And now you're telling me I have to educate executives about what they're looking for. And what happens when they also own the business analysis and the quality assurance? Like, is a PMO definitionally, you got to have somebody to help you if you're going to be a leader, or if you want to be in one, you better have a leader, one of the two? What do we got here? What constitutes a PMO from a staffing?
So for definition, from a definition perspective, we're going to separate the project management office from like a project team or program team that is running a single project or a single program. And when those projects or programs end, the PMO function, that project office function, goes away. That's not what we're talking about here. That is what I call, a project function or project office. That's not really the business unit that we're talking about here. So what we're talking about is the sustainable business unit. And if it is a business unit, then, and we want that business unit, regardless of size, which I'll address in a second. And Andrea, I think we'll be able to talk about that as well, our next guest. Regardless of size, if it is a business unit and you want to have your seat at the table as a business unit, you need to think and act like a business unit and behave as the way all the other business units in the organization behave. For example, you need a business plan, not a charter. One of the fundamental mistakes that PMO leaders make is they set the PMO up as if it was a project right from the beginning. A charter is for a project, which is a temporary endeavor. Why set yourself up as a temporary endeavor right from the start? You want to be treated like a business unit, regardless of size. Act like one. Build a business plan. Show how you're not going to be a cost center, but how you're going to be a value center, how you're going to create value to the organization, and how you are going to ensure that that value is worth it, the worth it factor, which is return on investment. IT has to do it. Sales has to do it. Marketing has to do it. Even HR has metrics that show the value they're contributing to the organization. So part of the issue is we don't treat ourselves like a business unit. And if we want to be a peer to the rest of the business units, we have to shift that mindset. Secondly, PMO leaders, most of my students in my implementation and coaching program start as PMO leaders of one. That's where you start. And you have to, through a very iterative, value-driven process, show value. And if you show value to the organization by giving them, and here's a secret, give them what they want before you give them what they need, meaning you have to answer the mail. You have to give them the thing that they know they want solved. And, we can talk about how you find the actual thing they want solved, but you got to give them what they want solved, build credibility, show your value to the organization. And then once they trust you and believe that you're going to deliver value for them, and you've built that know, like, and trust factor, then you can say, hey, you know what's happening here? That thing that you wanted solved, well, we fixed that, but let's make sure that doesn't keep happening. So to do that, we're going to have to get to the underlying root cause, which is, by the way, you saying yes to 85 projects when you have budget for 40, or when you only have resources for 40, right? And let's not try to do 100 things at once. Let's do what we can actually do and be successful with and get those results faster, and then keep generating more value through our portfolio.
It
so
sounds like
you absolutely can do it with one person. You just start
It sounds
small.
like to me, though, you would still want to get a body in there as fast as possible. I mean, if you're showing value, it sounds, well, let me ask this question. Who decides that we need a PMO? Is it because somebody went and made the pitch, or an executive said I needed one of these? Because if so, it seems to me like they should be making a business decision early about how much resourcing they need to put in it to get the outcome they want. Because isn't that the problem? We forget about the outcome. That's what they really wanted. And so it seems, I don't know, I'm struck. I feel so sorry for this person that sent in a note saying I'm a party of one PMO, and they have me overwhelmed. Because everyone will say that they're overwhelmed. You're talking about the value equation.
Well, so, and I would highly recommend, I actually have a podcast episode that specifically talks to the PMO of one and where you start on that, because a lot of our students are in that position, and that's where they start, but that's not where they ultimately end up. And you can talk to Andrea about this too when you bring her on, because she had a PMO. When I first met her, she had a PMO, she had her seat at the table, and her job was to try and keep it. And then she did so well there and knocked it out of the park and now she got an even bigger role in a big organization doing some really important things, but she's starting from scratch. They know they need a PMO. They wanted somebody who could knock it out of the park, which is why they hired Andrea. And now she has to build again, right? And so she's using the same implementation program to do that, and can talk to you about like how she's doing that. But the challenge with being, you got to start somewhere. And the problem is that you're going to have what I call Thanksgiving eyes, all you PMO leaders of one out there. You're going to want to fix all the things. You're going to want to say yes to everything. And what I encourage and what I teach is an iterative approach to value delivery that addresses that pain point that's obvious to them. That's the reason they brought you in there. That's the reason they want you there. Go fix that. And then once you fix that and showed how you're not just, making projects better, but you're helping the organization achieve the outcomes it's looking to achieve, the business results it's looking to achieve. Once you've done that, then you can come in and fix the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. The reason you're overwhelmed is because you're trying to do too many things. We've had tons of successful PMO leaders of one that started that way, got good results, excellent results, then built on that credibility and built that momentum, got their seat at the table, were able to ask for funding to hire more people, and on it goes. But you've got to start somewhere. And in the case where, because you asked Kendall a question, well, does it come from the top, or, is it a grassroots, or is it from the top? And the answer is yes. It's sometimes both of those. Sometimes it's one or the other, or a little bit of both. But here's the secret for all of you that either did the convincing to get your to get that PMO role, and they're like, your business leaders are like giving you a little bit to see if you're going to be able to do it, but they're not quite in just yet. Or even if they are the ones that said, hey, we need a PMO. No matter which way that comes, I can tell you this: you have less time than you think to show value. And that's because by the time the business leaders were frustrated enough with the pains they were dealing with to say yes, whether they're finally like, oh, a PMO can fix this, let's do that. Or you were like, trust me, a PMO can fix this, let's do it. Either way, you have less time than you think, because they have been dealing with whatever those pains are that they finally said yes to, finally funded for a long time. And so by the time you're getting finally to fire the starting gun and do that first fix, they want it yesterday. That's how business leaders work. That's how all of you are in your personal lives. You're like, okay, great. I finally saved up enough money to buy this thing. I want it in my house today. Right? So that's just the nature of humans and how we operate. So the minute you get to fire that starting gun, you can't say, yes, I'm going to do all the things. You've got to pick the one thing that you know belongs in your space, that's something you can fix, and be very, very certain it's actually the root cause of the problem you think it is, which is, Kendall, while we were talking about, it's probably not fixing project management. It's probably actually the beginning of the process where projects are not getting prioritized properly, resources aren't getting assigned properly, strategy isn't connected to the projects. Like, things are crazy up there. If you feel that, fix something in there first, or you will never get enough credibility or show results that are going to get you that momentum to keep going.
Yeah, the higher level way to me that you were just describing that sounds like a business unit. That's how somebody starts a piece of business. They don't really care if you've got all of it right. You have to show that you have a sale, that you have something happening. So I'm hearing, don't be good, be valuable, right? Don't worry about being right, be valuable, right? And get into it. We're about at half time here. And I wanted to ask one last question though for you, in your gut reaction to it. If I'm going to have a PMO that's successful, how much in that, and we'll ask again later tonight perhaps, but how much of that is going to be related to having a good PMO leader or good leaders outside the PMO?
Oh, wow. That's a
obviously
tough one.
You need both, but where does the break first happen?
Oh, well, so first is going to be with whoever sees the light. And sometimes that's going to be someone that ends up being the sponsor and ensuring that this PMO can get set up, or says we really need a PMO. It could be coming from outside, or it could be coming from that PMO leader who says, please give me a chance to fix all this. I can do this, right? So I think that's kind of a chicken and the egg, because you could see benefits in either. However, it really almost doesn't matter as long as when that PMO leader is there, they know how to find the champions. They know how to find the people whose pain they can fix, and and people that will say, the PMO did that for me, and here's the story I can tell you about our success, because that is a critical component to being able to continue to grow that PMO, is those success stories and being able to talk about the value that they are creating for key stakeholders in the organization. So it does depend on having somebody that understands, as a PMO leader, that their job is to be a business leader and to understand how to help the organization deliver on strategy with high return on investment, and that they are not there simply to make sure projects are on time, on budget. So don't fix project management first, fix the business problems, and your business leaders will see you earn your seat at the table because you get the business, as opposed to trying to make them get project management.
And I like your top line there. And I'm also aware, now that you've said that, with some of your own techniques that I've seen or that you've talked to, and you've already mentioned tonight, part of the mechanism of really doing that, so I'll tell the audience around this, is helping to find the key problems first that you need to help them solve first. So that's a technique, right? To get in there and uncover the reality of things. We're not going to get into that tonight. They get to pay for that, or they get to go and hang out with you for that or something, right? And the other one was helping to identify the real champion in the context that you're actually in, right? So these are some of the many things you have to sort out and either sequence or uncover when you're in this role. I think it's kind of what I'm hearing, that there's a whole bucket of things I'll need to go through to get there. I'm gonna find out now if what you say works. We're gonna talk to a PMO leader. How's that sound? I got you now.
That sounds fantastic.
We need to have a different kind of talk show here where I say, "Oh, really? Well, guess who I have behind the curtain?"
I'll be like, "Bring it, baby."
Okay, so we're going to say goodbye to Laura for a minute. We're going to put her on hold, just put her on pause for a second, and we are going to bring up our practitioner, Andrea Cirelli. Where is she? She's out there somewhere. There she is. Hey, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
I've got you. I hope everybody else can hear you as well. So you're coming to us from Boston, and you're currently working with in the life sciences area, right? Around Boston Halloran?
I am. Halloran Consulting Group. Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your PMO and a little bit about the context of the company you're in, though. So frame it for us.
So the PMO is new. I've been hired recently to build a PMO, create one. They had some challenges.
Party of one?
Absolutely. I am a party of one.
Okay. And so there you are. So there you are building a PMO. So who told you to do this? Was it at executive level? How did this come about? What was the business driver?
There is it from the executive level. It definitely came down that they felt that they've been, going along for some time without project management consistency and regularity, and they wanted to expand the services there and look at growing the capability of their current project managing team. They felt the need for the PMO and did some due diligence up front. It's part of their overall business strategy to have solid project management experience and also resource management, kind of the full end-to-end solution is what they're trying to achieve right now. So developing a project management office and hiring me was certainly the first pass at that. And then they've kind of handed over the reins to me to get it going.
Well, I think you're living the condition that Laura just told us was the no-no almost, in the sense of you were brought in to solve the project management problem, right? In a sense, right? Get project management better, more robust. I'm not trying to say it was broken, but fix that, make it better and make it stronger. And there you were showing up and hearing from Laura, yeah, you got to do that. And so how are you wrestling with that, given that your brief was to fix project management? And now we're hearing from the guru that, that's the one problem you can't fix first. What are you thinking?
It's interesting. And this fell across my lap, so to speak. And when I saw the job posted, I got very excited. And I will tell you that when I learned that this was a new organization, PMO, that they needed to be stood up, I know that I had exactly what works in my pocket, my toolkit, and I knew exactly what I would be in for, but I had confidence because I've done this, and I've gone through it, and I've seen how successful it can be when you're changing your mindset about the PMO.
Well, you say you've been told about the mindset. So how are you addressing that with your own, well, I guess you don't have a team, but with your own stakeholders in terms of the changing your
So
mindset?
I have the reason why I, went forward and full steam ahead with this role is because I spoke with the senior leadership team there during my interview process. We had some excellent conversations about what their goals and objectives were. And it wasn't just about fixing project management. They had the vision that, this could be a service to help support their organization in multiple different strategies, right? Multiple different service areas. So they had that. There's biggest champion is the VP of Consulting Services. He really has this solid vision, and it's important that every concept and everything that I've thrown out at him, he's been a huge proponent for. I mean, he sees it, he understands it, he gets it. So he's very supportive, and you need that. Anyone, especially if they're a project manager or a PMO of one, you cannot succeed unless you have the full support, and your champions are at that senior level. The owner of the company, the senior leaders, I've been received so well there. And they're all very excited to see where I can bring this organization. And, I've explained it in such a way where Laura has supported me as well through this whole process. But as I grow, my plan and my vision for it, being so well received, once again, it's my confidence. I know it works. And building it with the organization is really, kind of refreshing. So I'm excited, very excited.
A fish in friendly waters. What level do you report to organizationally? How do you describe it? Your immediate.
I report directly to the vice president.
Vice president.
Services.
Okay, so you're
correct.
So there you were setting up a PMO, getting the vision aligned, not the vision of a PMO, but the vision that they needed to have from you. And you're beginning to do perhaps some of these techniques. What's the biggest thing that you've discovered in your actioning building a PMO that caught you off guard? Perhaps you didn't hear in the training. Perhaps you haven't heard in your 20 years of project management experience where you're like, oh, so this is how it's going to be. What have you learned?
It's interesting. I think when you're focused directly on process and are things going from A to Z, right? And making that right, which is what we kind of default to sometimes. I think especially if you're a project manager, it's inherent in you, right? You want to get the project from start to finish. It's got to go through the waves,
execute.
Execute. That's all we think about, right? So what I find is that, you do take a step back and take a step out of that and look at everything that's happening around it. I love to focus on the human side of projects and people, and what's making them move through these things. And you'll learn a lot when you sit back and listen to what makes people tick and what makes people function and how they work, and how they want to be working. It's very interesting when and it lights me up a little bit, obviously, because I like to see when people are happy in what they're doing and effective and things move smoothly. So I think the one thing that always gets me like that is when I focus on the people. And you always come up with something different, right? Because everyone's different, but you always get a different way that people are working or thinking or being.
Tell me more about this people-centric. Well, again, being a PMO of one right now, but you're working with projects, presumably at some level, and you're having to engage with the vice president level. What is the people side of this that you're picking up on, that you're needing to see? Are you anticipating it, or that's your experience, or that's what you're dealing with now?
Yeah, and I've had this experience in my last role in building and setting up a PMO at my previous job, and coming into this, and it's the same, right? Different industry or different, well, not different industry, but it's similar. You have 200 plus projects going on and 70 something project managers doing it, right? So there's a lot happening. And within that, you have subject matter experts or clinicians or doctors or practitioners or whatever it is that are focused on the actual work. And though they're also wearing the hat of the project manager. Some of them want it. Some of them love doing the both, wearing the both hats. Some of them hate it. They just, why do I have to do this project work when I should be focused on this execution, which I love to do? And then you have, kind of people in between. So I love to find out, what everyone's kind of flavors are, right? And then let's take a look at a bigger piece of that and say, when we get there, say, well, okay, who can we get to focus on the actual output of the work, the good stuff that needs to happen for the project to finish? And then who can be that, bubble up to be that project manager where they love to do this work so much and then get really into it. Let's give them this, not the tools specifically, but let's give them the capability to do that work, elevate them in that way, make sure they have the support they need, really dive in there. So look at the people holistically, who's doing what, who's wanting to do what, and where can we take that, right? I think that's a part of making people work efficiently and the best they can.
Are you finding the virtual environment is making that any harder? Is this any different than what we're all facing in a virtual environment based on the nature of the PMO or how you envision a PMO interacting and being built? How is the virtual environment?
I think it's a culture thing. I'm at a company now that was doing remote work with employees all over the country way before COVID hit. And then my previous role, everybody was physically in a health center. And then they all had to be remote. And so that was really challenging. So I think, one, it's the culture. If it's already pre-accepted, you've got an easy way there. But project managers should definitely be good leaders. So no matter where you have to herd the cats from, you should be able to, be supported. PMO should help support that, skill. And be able to still do what you need to do virtually, over the phone, over messaging, or whatever means. We have so much great technology now. You can use almost anything.
Laura told us earlier today that size doesn't matter. Actually, it doesn't really have anything to do with the size of the number of projects in terms of what needs to happen, where we tend to focus, where we should be focusing. When you took on this role yourself, or when you've seen PMOs before, how much what's your run room in terms of time horizon? How long do you have to, how long is your brief? Is it, because she mentioned to us, by the time they decide to set up a PMO, they're probably like, great, we all approved the budget. We all got it in. We found the right person. It's Friday. Why hasn't something happened? Right? How long do you have? What is the perception of time for the PMO and as you've experienced it?
Well, so personally, I've had experience pre-Laura. I'm going to go there with that. And then I've had experience during Laura and then, right now. But I will say that I think we all inherently, or me, for example, jump in and want to fix things, right? Okay, where is it broken? Let me fix it and move on. But it goes deeper than that. So there really has to be that upfront fact finding, a lot of research, a lot of assessments, a lot of really thinking in all these different ways about the current state, right? And what's really happening here is just because that people don't have a good, budget template to walk through and they keep messing it up. Is it really, about, that they can't get a hold of the people they really need and how do they, get there? Or is it about that they weren't set up for success right from the beginning? So they really have to take a look at all of these things holistically, and there's really shouldn't be a set time on it. I don't ever set an expectation that's beyond my reach. I like to do things in small chunks. And if I can do one thing to make your life easy, then that speaks volume.
So let me follow up with that
because that's that impact that Laura's always talking about.
Right. Laura has us uncovering the people that really have the real need, the real change makers in that context, who is going to provide us value and support. She has us uncovering where value actually exists, because that's what the PMO has to deliver. It's against the value, not about improving the metrics of project management in and of itself. You just said the time is not the driver here at all. It's about getting something turned around really fast. Oh, looks like I have a motorcycle out there. So last question before I bring Laura back on. How will you know if you're succeeding? What are your metrics for success as you have developed this and are delivering? How do you know what's
So
good
I
here?
think, so I guess once again, it's about feedback, right? There's no failure. There's only feedback. And I think that if
No
you
failure,
listen to what you put out there, and I don't mean just to survey, it's really getting with the people that you've instituted that change with. You know, if you seriously, how is it helping them? How is it making their life better? And hopefully you've orchestrated that or thought about that before you even made that change, right? But following through and then course correct. I don't think we should ever expect to put anything out that's perfect the first time, right? So if you come to me and say, this isn't working, okay, let's dig in deep. Let's figure out how it's working. Come up with some creative ways to fix it or solve that business challenge, right? But then let's work through it together. Is it really what you expected? Is it really something that's providing you value now? Or is it just something you look at once a month, right? Or whatever. So it's really that follow through. How do you know if you just checking boxes and just handing out things that you've done, a template or this, a report, if it's not bringing any value to people, then it's not going to be any use.
So it's not intrinsic in that sense. You are counting on that feedback loop to tell you how it's going. You are being guided by a business outcome.
Absolutely. And it should live and breathe and grow. Those business things, things change so much and so fast these days.
Yeah.
So if I give you something that's going to help you for 3 months, it might not be the same thing that's going to be helping you in 8 months. You might need to mature it or grow it or do something with it or modify it, right? But where that open dialogue should be is that I've helped you solve something. I've helped you accomplish something that was really weighing on you, or something that as a business leader you need. So how do we keep that relationship open? It's a service, right? It's an ongoing service.
Ongoing service. It's a business unit. That's what we heard from Laura. So with that, I'm going to bring Laura back on. We're going to have about 9 minutes to go through 3 questions I have for you guys, but I want to bring Laura on first. So Laura, there she is. Someone who's gone through your method, someone who already has a bunch of experience. Yeah, go ahead and meet each other. Air kisses, everyone.
We go way back.
We do go way back. And by the way, Andrea is incredibly modest. She's not even telling you her best superhero moments in all of this. She's a real rock star. And I actually had her on the podcast talking about some really phenomenal things she did during COVID, working at a health center and things like that. So I'm just saying, she's she's very
to
modern.
The podcast and hear more from Andrea as well. Okay,
exactly.
Quickly for you for a second, Laura. Before we start a little lightning round here, what did you hear in there that you found most interesting that you hadn't already told us?
So I loved, so it's funny because I have the advantage of knowing this program that I have that she's been through that. And I say, oh, yep, she's doing that. She's doing that. She's doing that. I can see it. Right. And it's so cool to see when people that have been through this process that we take our students and clients through, that it becomes who they are and how they define what they do. And Kendall, I don't know if you remember a conversation you and I had many years ago when we first set up Project Management for Change, and we were talking about like a debrief after we did the first Project Management Day of Service. And you and Mike said to me, and even Marcus said to me, how do you define that thing you do? And package that for what's the framework around that? How do you do that? And I said, I don't know. It's just what I do. Right. And that's what I saw here with Andrea today, is that it's interesting to see, like, her evolution as a PMO leader, and it's just what she does. She's like, well, naturally, you have to do all of the assessment work to figure out where the business problems are. And naturally, it's not just about fixing project management. It's about finding that thing you can fix quickly and fixing that so that you build credibility and show value. And I love the emphasis that Andrea's always had on people. And really, that you must, as Andrea's heard me say a million times, you must do change with people and through people, not to people, right? And this applies to all of you project managers out there, all of you PMO leaders. You must bring them with you on the journey of change. And what Andrea so astutely just honed in on right away was, it's about the people, and it's not about the outputs our projects are creating. It's about the people that are a part of that process and understanding that. So I thought that was really cool.
We're getting lots of nuggets in here. So I hope somebody's writing some of this down or finding out where they can go read more about it. I don't think it's anything I've read out of some of the associations. I think it does take this practitioner and this thinking. You've thought a lot about it, obviously, and you've worked it. Okay, lightning round here. So I'm going to get something from each of you on the next couple of questions. So there I was being asked to go start a PMO or to step into one that kind of hadn't done what it was supposed to do. Probably it helped some projects be better. Project manager got promoted to a PMO, and they're like, no, we need you. So one of us has stepped in. Some person on this on this webcast is stepping in to take over PMO. Laura, biggest risk they're going to face. Number one risk that they're about to collide with. Go.
The PMO leader when they're pulling in to do the fixing.
I'm walking in as PMO and I have to get moving. What's the biggest risk? Now, what do I have to do? What are the risks? What's the biggest risk I'm facing?
The biggest risk you're facing is probably yourself and not knowing why you're there, right? I think that's probably a really big one. We can either we can either come in and do the right thing and solve that right problem by really, truly understanding the role you have and what you're supposed to do and how you go in and do it and what questions ask. Or you can go in with what I talk about, like Thanksgiving eyes, and you want to fix everything and you're so excited about it and you really want to rescue and show value, and you fall flat on your face because you said yes to too many people and did too many of the wrong things, the fixing project management things.
Know why you're there.
Yes.
Pick three. You've ever heard that before? Pick three.
Yes, Kendall is famous for, and Andrea, Andrea's heard the pick three thing because I said that because I learned that from you, Kendall.
Whoops. Okay, hey, Andrea.
Okay, I get it.
She's already told you the first answer, so there you were. What's the second answer? What's the number one risk you face as a practitioner?
Expecting to do it all yourself. And I think, yeah, I do. I believe that because, and I've been saying, I feel like I've been saying it the first 2 months of this new role to the executives, to the teams from all levels. I said, I'm not building this PMO and giving it to you. You are building it with me. And, I kind of, I know it works, and I know, best practices, and I know got a lot of experience, and thanks to Laura, I've got some even more experience, but they need to know what they need. And we need to work together to build it. So I think taking on the role and knowing that you're sitting there and saying, okay, what do I build next? And how do I do this? And then what am I doing after that? It's not your job to come up. Well, you think it's your job to come up with all of that by yourself, but it's not. You need to involve everybody to really find out what's needed.
I'm going to follow up with you on this. You said I'm going to find out from everybody what's needed. What's the role of having a mentor for you in an actual organization that you're inside, Andrea? What is the need for that? What is the role? What kind of person would that have to be when you're running a PMO? It sounds fairly new.
I'm excited about this because Halloran Consulting Group has a fantastic mentorship program already in place. So excellent. When I started, I filled out the form saying, sure, sign me up. I signed up for both a mentor and to be a mentoree. And I've got both. I am mentoring another manager, and she's very excited to learn more. I'm very happy over the top happy to share my experiences with her. And then I have been paired with an executive who will be mentoring me. So I get to learn from that executive leadership, all the skills I need to really understand the company and, its growth and where it is, and just the skills that she can, provide to me. I'm just very excited over it. And then I don't like to ever stop learning from people. You can learn whatever from a book, but you've got to learn from more humans. And I think that mentoring and being a mentoree is just so important, and everyone should do it.
I heard something interesting in there. Your organization has a program already set up, and it's at the executive level. It's viewed as an executive leadership issue. Laura, needing a mentor, what happens? What do people need to look for with as a PMO leader to get a mentor? Where should they be looking, and what should they be looking for? Or is it any different than any other profession in that sense?
Sure. I just want to pause on one thing really quickly, because my heart goes out to those PMO leaders of one, and I want to make sure they really heard what Andrea said, which is you are not a PMO of one. You have an army of people in the organization that want what you can deliver with them and through them and build together. So that was so big. Andrea, well said. That was so big. And I want to make sure that people remember that, because when you are starting out as a PMO of one, you do need to understand to leverage all of the people around you that can help you together build this better future for the organization. And that leads very nicely to mentoring. Right? Because when I was a PMO leader inside organizations for 15 years, I always found the people that cared the most, not the people that should care the most. And for example, I was in a PMO where the business leader, everybody was scared of this guy. Everyone was scared of him, but he was ultimately the sponsor, the Uber sponsor that said, I want a PMO to deliver my business portfolio programs. And the one part of the organization built the PMO, hired me to do it, put some program managers together and said, poof, you're a PMO. And what happened was that the business leader was who everyone's scared of, was the best mentor I could have asked for, because he had figured out how to navigate the politics of the organization. He had figured out how to get things done. He was relatively new, so he could help me figure out how to work in this really special culture of this environment that I was working in. So my advice is that you find the people that care the most about the PMO being successful and ask them to, you don't have to be all pressury with, will you be my mentor, right? You can, if you have opportunities where that's a formal and supported process, but you can also just say, hey, I'd love it if we could connect on a regular basis so I can keep you educated and informed on what's going on and get your advice on what this organization needs to do and look like and the business problems it needs to solve.
So let me take it from there.
You ask those political questions.
Yeah, there you go. And then you dig in from there. But I thought that was a really nice cap there. It's who does care, not who should care. We can't worry about the shoulds in that context. Last question. We're actually about a minute under where I need to be, but I'm going to ask this one anyway. So lightning round again on this, guys. Here we go. I have a bunch of PMs listening in on this, watching this tube of YouTube-ness, and they're in the PM role. What do PMs who find themselves in a PMO, they are not the PMO leader, what do the PMs need to know? What do they need to be ready to do? How can they be good PMs in a PMO? In the context of a PMO, what does a PM need to be? What does a PM need to know to be a good member, a good citizen of a PMO? Laura, and then we're going to let the practitioner have our final word. Laura.
Yes. They need to become an impact driver. They need to understand, which simply means they understand that the reason that they are there and managing projects, running projects, or supporting the PMO capability being built out, they need to understand that their role is to help the organization deliver on that strategy. Whatever their small piece of that is, their role is to help achieve those business outcomes, not just project outputs. So if they shift that mindset and understand that the role of a project manager is actually more of an investment manager than a project manager, meaning you're given investment of resources, time, energy, focus, and you must help the organization manage that investment to achieve the ultimate return on investment. If you do that, you will be an invaluable strategic asset to your organization, regardless of where you sit.
I don't see that anywhere in the many pages of the PIN box. So this is a shift away from the thinking about the tools in that context. Andrea, take us out.
I agree with that completely. You need to build the PMs that are now part of the PMO. they should be spreading that, and they should be fostering a community of people like that. So they need to help you, support you in training other project managers, or getting out there in the project management center of excellence, and spreading the goodness about how to make an impact, as Laura said, on the business. So they're helping others, they're supporting each other, they're networking with each other. And this is all part of what I look for when PMs report directly to the PMO. They need to be able to be that champion as well, and not just get put out on a project to do some work. It's not what it's about. It's a lot more than that.
Well, thank you very much then, Guess. I greatly appreciate your thoughts there. Hey, audience, you may not have heard it here first, or you may not have heard it all, but you've heard it from Massachusetts to Florida via Virginia and DC. Harry, come on up here and tell us what we need to know to punch out here tonight.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for being on the show, especially Kendall for being our host. Laura, Andrea, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Just real quickly, we have 2 events coming up. One is the next True Talks is February 16th, and the topic of that is going to be on stakeholder management. So keep your eyes out for more information. We'll be sending that out very shortly. And then, as we talked about earlier, the PM Day of Service is coming up, which is led by our 2 co-leaders, 2 co-founders who are on this call right now. But that's February 19th, and it's a virtual event. And for more information, go to pmforchange.org. We're excited to help with that, with the PM Day of Service. I think it's the 9th year or 8th year, I can't remember. Anyway, the other thing just to mention too is that the PDU card we'll send out after the show. Probably it'll be 1 or 2 days from now. But again, thank you all for joining, and hope this was educational and informative. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
PMO
much.
Leaders.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.